Hey everyone, this is Andrea again, and today we're going to be completing step 2 of the Carbon tutorials, working with the Carbon design system. Okay, so I'm honestly just going to kind of get right into it. In the first video, we set up our environment a little bit, we forked, we cloned the branch, and if you still need to kind of complete that step, feel free to click on these links. Okay, so our first step here seems like we're going to fetch upstream. Okay. I'm just going to use this little icon here. And looks like we're going to check out the branch as well. Cool. So looks like it's asking me to add this file, so I'm just going to do that really quick. Awesome. Let's see here. Build and start app. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and run yarn. And then we're gonna run yarn start. You should see something similar to where the previous step left off. Cool. Awesome. Okay. IE 11 polyfills. Before we get started with this step, we'll be adding some components that require IE 11 polyfills. Okay, so go ahead and add these imports to the top of the root index.js. They aren't all needed, but we'll add them all to play it safe for the duration of the tutorial. So looks like we'll be adding all of these imports. Cool. Okay, next step, install grid. In our last step, we added our style components and icon packages. Now that we're building the pages with grid, we'll need to install one more Carbon package. Stop your development environment. And looks like we're going to add the Carbon grid. Okay, so we just ran this command. Now it looks like we need to configure our grid to use 16 columns instead of the default 12 columns. So to do that, we'll be changing grid columns to 6T to be true. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and add it to our index.sass file. So this is really what we're looking for to make sure that our columns are going to default to 16. Okay. So we are going to now run yarn start one more time. And while that's running, I'm going to read the next step. Oh. Add landing page grid. Let's add our grid elements to landing page.js. In order to use the grid, we need to wrap everything in a div class. Okay, it's still running. Our column sizes are specified by the number of columns we'll be spanning. If we use box call LG-4, that means it'll span 4 of the 16 columns. Okay. If we use -8, it means it'll span 8 of the 16 columns, and so on. We've included the design for this tutorial app in the design.sketch file found as a top-level file in the Carbon tutorial repository. But if you don't have Sketch installed and available to inspect the design, we'll provide the screenshot. Just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to toggle between the code and Sketch, so I'll just kind of refer to their screenshots. We've included the design. Oh, sorry, I just showed that. Okay. So this is what it will look like. Pro tip. Oh, cool. We'll break this down into 3 rows. The first row with a gray background doesn't appear to need any columns. The second row with a white background looks like it has 2 columns of different widths. The third row with a gray background looks like it has 4 columns of equal width. Okay. So it looks like within the landing page, we'll be returning all of this. And as mentioned, we will have 3 rows. Okay. We added a class of VxGrid for grid containers since our rows need to expand the whole page without any margins. Well, we also added some custom classes like landing page pattern, etc., which we will use later. Okay, so it looks like really our first step is adding these different rows to the landing page. Let's do that. Let's see how they have it. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Should be fine. Also take notice of the second row. The tab content only covers 7 columns of this large viewport to prevent overly large line lengths. Okay. Trying to make sure I'm not missing anything here. Don't think so. Okay, so we just finished adding the landing page grid. Looks like now we're going to build the landing page. We'll start adding HTML elements and components by row. In our first row, we'll need a breadcrumb component. First, let's import the components we need. Okay, so it looks like we'll be importing breadcrumb and breadcrumb item into the landing page .js file. we can now add our component to the first row along with a header like so. Cool. So it looks like within the first row we'll be now using breadcrumb and breadcrumb item components, as well as adding an H1. Cool. You may notice the styles look off. Don't worry, we'll fix these later. Oh yeah, they do. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is when we need tabs and button components. I think I added this, but let's see. Okay, just do that just in case. Awesome. Before we can render tabs, we need to add some props. I'll copy and paste this. I believe I also did this, but let's just double check here. Perfect. Modify the second row to use the tab component. So now we'll actually be rendering the tab component with some content. Oh, okay. Let's add what is this tab? There we go. And if you were to run DAP to check our accessibility violations, you would notice that, let's see. Oh, okay. Using multiple navigation landmarks must have unique labels specified with ARIA label or ARIA label labeled by. Okay, so it looks like we want to fix a few accessibility issues. Let's add this to our breadcrumb opening. And then we'll add this to our tabs. Perfect. Next, we'll need to add a styling override to move the tabs to the right viewports. So we're going to create a file in the landing page. Let's just copy and paste this name here. And it looks like we'll be adding this into our override SAS file. And then in landing page SAS, add this import to the top of the file. So we're copying the import into our landing page. Now we can add our image and text for each column in the first tab. So it looks like now we'll actually be rendering some image and some content. So let's copy and paste all of this. Let's make sure. Okay. Sorry, I'm just making sure here. So it looks like we'll be adding, oh, into the first tab. Okay, just double checking which tab this is. Perfect. Now let's set the image size and landing page size. Oops. Okay, third row. The third row will be created in a later tutorial, so we'll just add some headers for now. So, looks like this will just is kind of like placeholder code for the third row. Perfect. Now we're going to style the landing page. We've added basic layout styles in landing page.sass. So let's add type, color, and spacing styles to match the design. We'll be using our spacing tokens. In app.sass, add these imports to the top of the file so we can use carbon breakpoints tokens in typography. So it's cool. They kind of, I guess, talk a little bit more about spacing tokens, which I'm not super familiar with. We'll just copy this and add it to the top of the file. Perfect. Then we're heading into the banner. Project Control-G toggles the grid and sketch. Cool. Back to landing page stats. We need to add space above the breadcrumb and below the heading. For that, add the following within landing page stats. So this will be our banner. Referencing the spacing token table, 16 pixels I can speak today, can be set with the spacing -05 token. Okay. The design calls for 128 pixels of space below the heading, and that's not in the spacing scale. We can I'm sorry, I can't read or speak. We can achieve that in the SAS by multiplying 32 pixels, spacing -1 by 4. We could use 128 pixels or 8rem directly in our styling. Okay, let's see what they want us to use here. So looking at the design, we want and need a wall-to-wall light gray background behind the banner and also behind the third row. This is a great opportunity to use a SAS mixin. We could put this at the top of the landing page SAS, but it's best practice to place mixin in the dedicated file to create a mixin. Okay, so it looks like we'll be creating a mixin file in our landing page. First, let's do that. Add the following coding. Since part of the design, we need to use gray 10 for our banner background. Also, we want the background to extend into the grid's outermost gutters to go the full width of the viewport. So given the DOM structure, we can achieve that by setting the background in an absolutely positioned pseudo element. Okay. So we're going to be adding all of this styling into the Mixin SAS file. After you've created the Mixin SAS file, import up top. Okay. So we'll be importing this file into our override. Oops, sorry, our landing page. Yep, to our landing page. Now to use a new Mixin, update the landing page banner declaration block. So we'll be adding this. Awesome. Next we can see that the H1 is using the H05 type. Let's look. Oh, wow. Okay. Oops, sorry. The switch symbol. Let's double check this. Cool. So the sketch symbol naming is consistent with the development SAS tokens to help translate design to development. So looking at the type token, we know to use productive heading. I definitely recommend looking at these documents while you're following along with the tutorial as well. Let's see what's next. I'll be adding the type style to landing page for the page heading. Oops. Perfect. Row 2. For our second row, we need to fix the tab's vertical positioning to match the design. By inspecting the tabs component, you can see that the tab height computes to 40 pixels. We can use that to create our negative top margin in run units. Okay, so we'll be adding this into our landing page to fix our top margin. We also need to adjust our vertical spacing type element. Like before, it's a matter of using spacing and type tokens, like so. Okay, so here I'm talking about the different spacing, styling. You may be wondering why there are vertical gaps between the type and spacers. Each type token has a line height that's suited for its font size. The vertical spacers adjacently touch the line height boundaries in the baseline. For consistency, as well as development ease, the margins and paddings don't need to offset line heights. Okay. So it looks like we'll be adding a bit more specific styling to our landing page. Okay. Row 3. Let's also add some styles for the last row, even though that will get used later in the tutorial. You'll notice that we get to reuse the landing page background Mixin that we just created. Awesome. So now we're adding, looks like some styling for the very last row, row 3. Ta-da! You should see a finished landing page. Okay. Let's see what's going on. Accidentally left an H1 in here. So if you see a discrepancy in the video, please know that that's what happened. But for now, I will move on to the repo page. It wasn't anything functional. It was just I accidentally left an H1, which was kind of distorting the styling. Okay, adding the repo page grid. Now in our repo page JS, we'll add our grid containers in the return section. Awesome. So let's copy this and head over to our repo page. Oops. Okay. Now build repo page. We currently have a repo page JS that contains a grid and placeholder content for the time being. In the next tutorial step, we're going to be querying an API to populate the data table component in this page. That'll be fun. As best practice to separate data fetching from the presentational components versus functional, go ahead and create a repo table JS as a sibling to the repo page within the repo page directory. Okay. Make sure, perfect. Gonna add that. First, we'll add our data table by importing a few components. Looks like it's quite a few different components that we'll be adding. Perfect. Okay. Then let's create the repo table component and export it at the very bottom of the page. So we're going to copy all of this and export it at the bottom right here. Okay, so just to kind of recap, we imported quite a few different components, and looks like we are rendering them all here and exporting the entire repo table component. Let's see. Okay. This component uses two props, rows and headers, and returns a Carbon data table. As for where the various table components came from, the data table story in the storybook was used to put together the data table structure. Awesome. At this point, return to repo page.js because now we need to render the static. Perfect. So we're going to import this into our repo page.js file, which is somewhere, oh, there it is. Then below the imports include the following arrays to pass into the repo table component. We'll be setting the rows array from an API in the next tutorial step. But for now, static examples will suffice. Okay, so we'll be copying all of this and adding it to our repo page below the imports. Okay. Lastly, in repo page.js, we need to simply replace data table will go here with awesome. Okay. So within our repo page, okay. Perfect. Now style repo page. Our styles for the repo page are mostly fine. We just need to update a few vertical spacing issues. So I know we did a lot there, but let's just recap again. Right now we are basically just hard coding the headers that will later be fetching from an API. We added a repo table that is passing headers and rows, which is again information that we've imported here. Okay, let's move on to styling. style repo page. In repo page dot or slash or dot sass, add the following styles. Beautiful. Congratulations, we've now created our static repo page. Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Cool. Submit pull request. Awesome. Okay. We're going to submit a pull request to verify completion of this tutorial step. Continuous integration. Run the CI to make sure we're all set to submit a pull request. Okay. Git add all. Okay. I'm going to copy this commit and push. Awesome. Finally, visit Carbon tutorial to compare. Okay, perfect. Oops, forgot to push it. So last step is pushing a repo. Okay, so I had a little bit of trouble with my pull request, but I just want to show what it should look like here. So again, making sure that your base is Carbon Design System React Step 2 for the second part of the tutorial. And we should anticipate that the final product should look like this. So a few things that we've added are the repo page, the grid. We've now added different images, text, and basically just rendering a lot more components and functionality. So we've added some styling, we've built a landing page, and repo, etc. One thing to note is I didn't play around with the grid layout too much, or the rows or the columns, so definitely recommend doing that as you're trying to familiarize yourself a bit more with Carbon. But yeah, kind of wanted to finish off on some final thoughts here. I know that I went through it fast, so again, just kind of echoing, if you want to play around with that, highly recommend you to do so. The different sizing and layout options. The one thing that I really appreciated was Carbon making sure and having a huge focus on accessibility. I know they've made it a priority to integrate that into all of their products, but I really like that they highlighted it as a step in this tutorial. They did mention DAP, which is Dynamic Assessment Plugin. For those of you that may not know too much, which neither do I, it's a real-time accessibility. Yeah, and I really appreciate that they did that. I thought that was really awesome. And last but not least, I didn't mention this last time, I forgot to, but if you've already pushed up the first tutorial and you're kind of like sitting around trying to figure out, what's going on with your PR, double check to see if you have had any comments on them. The Carbon team has been working really hard to go through every single tutorial and adding both comments and feedback. So I definitely recommend checking those out. You'll kind of see them here if you haven't gotten your PR approved in a while. So yeah, But last but not least, thank you again for checking out this video. I know, again, I went through it fast, but hopefully it was helpful in some way.